Honey looks innocent because it comes dressed as nature. Bees, flowers, golden jars, soft labels, and words like raw, pure, natural, and organic. But that sweetness can hide a very ugly business. Some honey may not be as raw as promised. Some has been tied to chemical residue concerns. Some uses confusing numbers to justify absurd prices, and some is so anonymous you can barely trace it back to a hive. Today, we are exposing 5 honey brands you may want to avoid and 3 that actually give you a better reason to trust the jar. 1. Nate's Nature. Are you using Nature Nates right now? If you are listening closely because the bottle sitting in your pantry may not be the clean, untouched, farm-fresh honey story you think you paid for, Nature Nates has faced legal allegations over its 100% pure raw and unfiltered honey label. The lawsuit claimed the honey was heated during processing and that some tested samples allegedly showed added syrups. To be fair, the case was dismissed, and the court did not officially confirm those accusations as fact. But do not get comfortable too fast, because this kind of problem does not need to send someone to the hospital tomorrow morning to matter. Sometimes the real damage starts smaller. It begins with a label you trust a spoonful, you stop questioning a brand image that tells you this is natural, wholesome, raw, and better for your family. Then that trust turns into habit. That habit turns into daily use. And daily use, especially with something sweet, is where the dominoes begin to fall. Real raw honey is supposed to feel closer to the hive than the factory. It may crystallize. It may look imperfect. It may carry pollen enzymes, floral character, and the natural variation that comes from bees' plants, seasons, and place. That is the whole reason people pay extra for words like raw, pure, and unfiltered in the first place. Now here is where Nature Nates becomes uncomfortable. If a honey sold as raw is allegedly heated too much, then the raw promise starts to wobble. The FDA treats added sweeteners in honey as economically motivated adulteration food fraud done to make a cheaper product look more valuable. And what happens when that trust breaks? You may not just be losing money, you may be loading more sugar into your body under a cleaner name. People drizzle honey into tea oatmeal toast, yogurt marinades, cough remedies, and late-night healthy snacks because honey feels safer than table sugar. But your body is not impressed by the cute bear bottle, the golden color, or the word raw printed in friendly letters. Too much sugar is still too much sugar. It can still push weight gain, blood sugar problems, cravings, and the slow metabolic mess that people only notice after months or years of just a little every day. The uglier part is the branding. Nature Nates does not present itself like a cheap industrial sweetener. It sells warmth. It sells family. It sells authenticity. It sells the feeling that you are making a better choice. And that is exactly why this case deserves scrutiny. When a brand wraps itself in purity, people lower their guard. They buy more, they use more, they recommend it to friends, they feed the machine with loyalty while the machine has every incentive to keep telling the same pretty story. So the answer is not to scream panic and throw every bottle into the trash. The answer is to become stricter than the label expects you to be. Do not buy honey just because the front says raw. Look for clear sourcing, batch testing, country of origin, beekeeper, transparency, and real explanation of how the honey is warmed, filtered, and bottled. Consider local beekeepers when possible. Learn that crystallization is not a defect, and stop treating honey like medicine. It is still a sweetener, and it still deserves restraint. 2. Sous Bee/Aunt Sue's. Now we are moving into a bigger problem. This is no longer just a question of whether honey is truly raw, truly unfiltered, or a little too polished by processing. This is about a bottle of honey that was alleged to contain residue from a chemical used in weed killers. Yes, I am talking about Sous Bee and Aunt Sue's honey. In 2016, Beyond Pesticides and the Organic Consumers Association filed a lawsuit against Sue Honey Association, the maker of Sous Bee and Aunt Sue's, claiming that products labeled 100% pure and natural had tested positive for glyphosate residue. Glyphosate is the active ingredient best known from Roundup-style herbicides. To be clear, this was a lawsuit and a labeling allegation, not a final courtroom declaration that every bottle on the shelf is dangerous. But the fact pattern alone is enough to make any careful shopper stop cold. Because when most people buy honey, they are not imagining herbicide residue. They are imagining flowers, bees, sunlight, a clean spoonful going into tea, maybe something old-fashioned, soothing, and safe enough to keep near the breakfast table. That is the emotional contract behind the word pure. And once glyphosate enters that conversation, the whole fantasy gets dragged out of the meadow. Now let us not pretend one spoonful of honey is the same as drinking a bottle of weed killer. That would be cartoon fear-mongering, and we do not need that. The real issue is quieter and more disturbing. Glyphosate is controversial because health authorities have not always spoken about it in the same voice. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans in 2015, while the US EPA has stated that current registered uses do not pose risks of concern to human health. That disagreement alone should make a consumer more cautious, not less. For an older shopper, a parent, someone already worried about cancer, risk, liver, stress, inflammation, hormones, gut health, or long-term chemical exposure, the point is not panic. The point is consent. You cannot choose what you are not told. You cannot manage your exposure to residues if a bottle shouting 100% pure gives you no reason to suspect anything beyond honey. This is how the problem happens. Bees do not live inside the label. They fly through the real world. They collect nectar and pollen from fields, roadsides, weeds, crops, and landscapes that may have been treated with herbicides. The company does not need to pour glyphosate into the bottle for residue concerns to show up. The contamination can begin far earlier out in the environment, long before the honey reaches the cute plastic bear or the familiar grocery shelf. And that is exactly why Sue Bee is such an important case. It is not some strange niche brand pretending to be fancy. It is a familiar American pantry name. It looks normal. It looks safe. It looks like the kind of honey your family might have bought for years without ever thinking twice. That familiarity is the trap. When a brand feels ordinary enough, people stop reading. They stop asking. They assume pure means clean in the broadest, most comforting sense. But pure honey does not automatically mean free from environmental residue. So the answer here is not to panic buy the most expensive jar on the shelf. The answer is to demand more than pretty words. Look for brands that talk clearly about sourcing, residue testing, organic standards, beekeeper relationships, and country of origin. Buy from local beekeepers when you can actually ask how and where the bees forage. Be skeptical of labels that lean too hard on pure and natural while giving you almost nothing about testing. 3. Wedderspoon Manuka. Before you spend $40, $60, or even over $100 on a jar of Manuka honey, stop and look at the number on the label. Because that number may be doing more work on your imagination than the honey is doing for your health. Some honey tricks you with purity, some honey worries you with chemical residue. But Manuka honey plays a more expensive game. It does not just sell sweetness, it sells number status, New Zealand mystique, and the feeling that you are buying something almost medicinal. And that is where Wedderspoon Manuka honey becomes worth questioning. Wedderspoon has faced a lawsuit over the numbers used on some of its Manuka honey labels, including ratings like 12+ and 16+. The allegation was that shoppers could interpret those numbers as equivalent to the well-known UMF rating system, even though the lawsuit claimed the products did not deliver the same level of non-peroxide antibacterial activity associated with UMF-rated Manuka honey. To be clear, this was a labeling dispute, not proof that every jar is fake or unsafe. But for a product sold at a premium price label, confusion is not a small problem. Because people do not buy Manuka honey like regular honey. They buy it for sore throats, wellness routines, immune support, digestion, skin, and that quiet feeling that they are doing something natural and smart for their body. That is why the price can climb so high. You are not just paying for taste, you are paying for trust. You are paying for the belief that this jar has a special strength ordinary honey does not. And when the label starts throwing around numbers that shoppers may not fully understand, the trust becomes very easy to manipulate. Most people do not know the difference between UMFMGOK factor, monofloral, and multifloral. They just see Manuka New Zealand raw and a big number on the front. Their brain fills in the rest. Higher number means stronger honey. Stronger honey means better health. Better health means the price is justified. That is a very convenient chain of assumptions. The problem is that different rating systems do not always measure the same thing. A large number on one jar does not automatically equal the same standard as a large number on another jar. And if a brand benefits from that confusion, while the shopper is left squinting at fine print, the issue is no longer just honey. It is wellness marketing dressed up as science. So no, the answer is not to swear off Manuka forever. The answer is to stop letting the word Manuka hypnotize your wallet. Before you pay premium money, look for clear explanations of what the rating means. Check whether the product uses UMF or MGO and understand what those numbers actually measure. Be careful with unfamiliar scoring systems that look official but are harder to compare. And most importantly, stop treating expensive honey like medicine unless a real medical professional tells you to. Wedderspoon may still be honey, but if a jar costs that much, the label should explain itself before your money does. 4. Great value. The scariest honey on the shelf is not always the one making the loudest promise. Sometimes it is the one making almost no promise at all. No beekeeper you can name, no field you can picture, no season, no flowers, no clear story from hive to bottle. Just a cheap golden squeeze bottle on a Walmart shelf asking you to trust it because the price is low and the label feels familiar. That is why great value honey deserves a harder look. This is not a case where we can simply say every bottle is fake or dangerous. That would be too easy and too careless. The real issue is more subtle. Great value represents the anonymous mass-market honey problem. It is cheap, convenient, widely available, and often stripped of the very details that help shoppers understand what they are actually buying. In 2011, Food Safety News tested honey sold across the United States and reported that many grocery store honeys had been filtered so heavily that they no longer contained pollen. That matters because pollen is not just some charming little trace from a flower. It can help show where honey came from, remove it, and the trail back to the hive becomes much harder to follow. And once that trail disappears, the consumer is left with a very uncomfortable question. Where did this honey really come from? That is the heart of the great value problem. It does not need luxury language, wellness claims, or fancy numbers to get into your kitchen. It wins because it is normal. It is cheap. It is sitting right there during a Walmart run next to cereal, bread, peanut butter, and tea. For many families, it feels like the practical choice, but practical should not mean blind. Honey is one of the easiest foods to make look trustworthy from the outside. Real honey, blended honey, overheated honey, ultra-filtered. Honey, imported honey, and honey stretched with cheaper sweeteners can all look golden, thick, and harmless in a plastic bottle. Your eyes cannot trace its source. Your spoon cannot tell you whether the pollen trail is intact. And your morning toast will not warn you if the product is less transparent than the label makes it seem. That is where cheap honey becomes a quiet training program. It teaches shoppers to accept honey with no biography, no region, no beekeeper, no harvest story, no meaningful explanation of filtration sourcing or testing. Just sweetness at a low price dressed up as a pantry staple. Now, that does not mean you have to panic every time you see a store brand bottle, but it does mean you should stop treating cheap honey like a harmless upgrade from sugar. It is still a sweetener. It still adds sugar to your diet, and if the brand gives you almost no information about where it came from or how it was handled, then it has not earned the health halo people casually give to honey. So here's the practical rule. If you buy great value, treat it like budget sweetener, not liquid gold from nature. Use less of it. Do not pretend it is medicine. And when you actually want real honey, look for clearer sourcing, local beekeepers, single origin jars, batch testing, and labels that explain how the honey is filtered and bottled. Because if a bottle cannot tell you where its honey came from, maybe it should not get full trust just because it is cheap. 5. Kroger. The most dangerous honey purchase is not always the lazy one. Sometimes it is the purchase that makes you feel smart. You walk past the cheapest bottles, you ignore the bargain bin honey, you skip the cartoon bear stuff and reach for something that sounds cleaner, calmer, and more responsible, Simple Truth organic raw and unfiltered honey. That is exactly where the trap begins. Kroger has faced a lawsuit over its private selection raw and unfiltered wildflower honey and Simple Truth organic raw and unfiltered honey. The allegation was that these products were labeled raw and unfiltered, even though the honey was allegedly heated during processing. To be clear, this was a labeling allegation, not a final ruling that every bottle is fake or unsafe. But the issue matters because Kroger is not selling this honey like ordinary sugar in a bottle. It is selling a cleaner choice. And that is the power of the supermarket halo. Words like organic, Simple Truth raw, and unfiltered do something to a shopper's brain. They make the product feel safer before you have actually verified anything. They make you feel like you have already made the responsible choice. You are not buying the cheapest jar, you are not grabbing the most anonymous bottle, you are paying a little more, choosing the nicer label, and telling yourself you avoided the industrial junk. But did you? That is the uncomfortable question. Because organic does not automatically mean truly raw. Raw does not mean much if the brand does not clearly explain heating. Unfiltered does not mean much if the shopper cannot understand what was removed, what stayed in, and how the honey moved from hive to shelf. The health impact here is not that Kroger honey is secretly poison. The real danger is more ordinary, which makes it more believable. A cleaner label can make people use sugar with fewer questions. They drizzle more into tea, add more to oatmeal, stir it into yogurt, put it on toast, use it in healthy desserts, all because the bottle feels better than regular sugar. But your body does not read branding. Too much honey is still too much sugar. It can still feed cravings, push calories higher, disturb blood sugar, and turn one natural spoonful into a daily habit that quietly works against you. And if the very reason you paid extra was the promise of raw, less processed honey, then the brand owes you more than a soft label and comforting words. That is why Kroger's case is different from cheap no-name honey. Great Value asks you to trust it because it is cheap. Simple Truth asks you to trust it because it looks clean. And sometimes the second trick is harder to notice because it makes you feel like you already did your homework. So do not let a private label halo do your thinking for you. If a bottle says raw and unfiltered, look for detail sourcing, country of origin, batch testing, heating, temperature, filtration process, and beekeeper transparency. Do not assume organic proves everything. Do not assume a gentle brand name means a transparent supply chain. And if the label gives you more emotion than information, treat that as the warning sign. After all, the point is not to fear every jar of honey on the shelf. The point is to stop rewarding brands that sell purity, wellness, and tradition while giving you very little proof. Real honey should not need a magic trick. It should give you clear sourcing, honest processing, and a reason to trust the beekeeper behind the bottle. So now let's look at 3 brands that actually get much closer. 6. Desert Creek. After all those slippery labels, Desert Creek feels refreshing. For one simple reason, it does not ask you to believe in a fantasy. It gives you something more useful, a place, a beekeeper logic, and a product that feels closer to the hive than the supermarket machine. That matters because one of the biggest problems with cheap honey is not always what you can see, it is what you cannot trace. No clear origin, no harvest story, no sense of who handled it before it landed in your tea. Desert Creek works against that anxiety by leaning into a more grounded promise, raw, unfiltered Texas honey, coming from a company built around actual beekeeping, rather than anonymous grocery store blending. And that difference changes the way you should read the jar. This is not honey pretending to be medicine. It is not hiding behind Manuka numbers. It is not selling a vague word like pure while giving you almost nothing else to inspect. Its strength is simpler. It gives the shopper a clearer mental picture of where the honey came from, why it may look or taste a little more natural, and why raw honey does not need to be perfectly smooth, perfectly identical, or perfectly polished to be valuable. That is important for older shoppers, especially because many people have been trained to think beautiful, honey means better. Honey, clearer color, smoother texture, easy squeeze, no crystals, no weirdness. But real honey can crystallize. It can vary. It can carry a stronger floral taste. It can feel less factory perfect. Those are not automatically flaws. Sometimes they are the very signs that the product has not been stripped down just to look obedient on a shelf. Now, do not turn this into a miracle story. Desert Creek is still honey. It is still sugar. If you pour it into every cup of tea and call it health, your body will not applaud your sourcing standards. Moderation still matters. But as a better pick, Desert Creek earns its place because it fixes one of the ugliest problems in the honey aisle: anonymity. It gives you a more believable route back to bees land and handling. And in a category full of pretty labels and slippery promises, that kind of return address is not a small thing. It is exactly the kind of proof a honey brand should be willing to offer. 7. Bee Harmony. The best honey does not just taste sweet. It tells you where the sweetness came from. That is why Bee Harmony works as a stronger pick after all the vague, polished, and over-marketed honey we have just looked at. This brand is not built around one magical word like pure, and it is not asking you to decode a confusing wellness number on the front of the jar. Its better argument is traceability. It gives the honey a trail, and in this category that matters a lot. Because bad honey often survives by staying vague. It says natural, it says pure, it says raw. Then it goes quiet right when the shopper needs details most. Where did the honey come from? What flowers shaped it? Who handled it? Was it blended from anonymous sources? Was it filtered until the story disappeared? Too many bottles ask you to trust a mood instead of giving you information. Bee Harmony pushes in the opposite direction. Its whole appeal is that honey should have a floral identity, not just a golden color. Wildflower honey should not feel exactly like orange blossom honey. Clover should not feel exactly like buckwheat. Different flowers, regions, and seasons create different flavors, colors, and textures. That is not a flaw. That is the point. Real honey is supposed to carry evidence of where the bees have been. This is where Bee Harmony becomes useful for the careful shopper. Instead of treating honey like a generic sweet liquid, it frames honey as something connected to bees, flowers, barrels, and jars. That does not make it perfect. It does not mean you should stop reading labels, but it does give you more to work with than a bottle that simply shouts pure and hopes you never ask the next question. The health lesson here is also more honest. Bee Harmony should not be treated like medicine either. It is still honey. It still adds sugar to your diet, Tari. But because it gives you a clearer story, it helps break the lazy habit of treating all honey as the same thing. When you understand the source better, you usually use the product with more respect. You taste it more carefully. You waste less. You stop dumping spoonfuls into everything just because the label sounds healthy. That is the real win. Bee Harmony is not a miracle jar. It is a better behaved jar. It gives shoppers something bad honey rarely gives them: context. And in a honey aisle full of pretty claims, context is exactly what trust should be built on. 8. Comvita UMF Manuka Honey. If you're going to pay Manuka prices, the jar should speak in a language you can verify. That is where Comvita UMF Manuka Honey becomes a much stronger pick. After Wedderspoon, the problem was not simply that Manuka honey is expensive. The problem was that expensive honey can hide behind confusing numbers, wellness language, and New Zealand mystique until shoppers no longer know what they are actually paying for. A big number on the front can look scientific, it can feel powerful, it can make the jar seem almost medicinal before the buyer understands the system behind it. Comvita works better because it gives the shopper clearer standards to follow. Instead of leaning only on vague prestige, Comvita uses recognized Manuka markers like UMF and MGO. That matters because Manuka honey is not ordinary honey with a luxury accent. If a brand is asking you to pay a premium, it should tell you what makes the honey premium, how that strength is measured, and why the number on the jar deserves your trust. That is the real difference here. A good Manuka brand should not make you feel smart while keeping you confused. It should make comparison easier. It should let you understand whether you're buying a mild everyday jar or a stronger, higher-rated one. It should give you a framework, not just a fantasy. And for older shoppers especially, that clarity matters. Many people buy Manuka for sore throats, digestion, immunity, skin, or general wellness. They are not just buying sweetness, they are buying reassurance. But reassurance becomes dangerous when it turns into medical imagination. Honey is not a replacement for treatment. It is not a cure-all. And even when it is high-quality Manuka, it is still sugar. That means it still needs moderation, especially for anyone watching blood sugar weight, dental health, or metabolic issues. So Comvita's strength is not that it magically turns honey into medicine. Its strength is that it makes the premium claim easier to audit. The buyer can look at the rating system, compare levels, and understand the jar with less guesswork. That is exactly what better honey should do. It should reduce confusion, not profit from it. Still be disciplined. Do not buy the highest number just because it looks impressive. Do not assume expensive means necessary. Choose the level that fits how you actually use it and treat it as a specialty honey, not a daily free pass. Because the best Manuka brand is not the one with the loudest aura. It is the one that makes the number easier to question, understand, and verify. Honey should be simple, but the shelf has made it complicated. Some brands hide behind purity claims, some behind clean labels, some behind confusing numbers, and some behind low prices. So do not shop by comfort. Shop by proof. Look for clear sourcing, honest processing, real testing, and labels that explain more than they imply. If this helped you see honey differently, like this video, subscribe, and tell us which pantry staple we should investigate next.